Alright folks, so I thought that I would do something a little different today and show you some of the original comic book art that I've collected over the years. It's not a lot, but it all means something to me, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's see what we got here. Alright, so this first piece is a prize that I actually won at the Chicago Comic-Con, I think 2002. This is a piece by artists Steve Kerr and John Larter, who were doing the G.I. Joe comic at that point in time. It was being published by Devil's Due and Image, so that's cool. I was sort of only a casual reader of that because I prefer the ones written by Larry Hama. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to G.I. Joe. But I do love G.I. Joe, so this was definitely very cool to just sort of win. I just went to a party they were hosting, and everybody got a ticket when they walked through the door, and I won that prize, so that was nice. This next piece on the right is by one of my personal favorite artists, Dave Johnson. I love Dave Johnson's work. He doesn't do a lot of comic book interiors anymore these days. He does do covers, and he does a lot of design work for animation. But this is one of his first comic books, around 1995, Super Patriot, a spin-off from Savage Dragon. So this was by Image Comics. This was the last page of the last issue of a 4-issue miniseries. So we've got Super Patriot, and that was just kind of cool to be able to get, you know, a page with the title character by one of my favorite artists. So that was great. These two pages are by Romita Jr. He's an artist that I usually love. Sometimes if he's doing really fast work, I agree, it doesn't always look amazing. But when he has time, I think he's got some really amazing technique. I think he's a good storyteller. I'm a big fan of what he did on Spider-Man. That said, these pages don't have Spider-Man himself, so they actually were pretty affordable. I think I got these on eBay pretty cheap. This one cost a little bit more because it's got Peter Parker in it, so he's the main character, but neither of them have Spider-Man. This doesn't have any main characters, so this one was really cheap. This one wasn't much at all. And I was like, well, it still looks great to me, so I was happy to get it. Whoops. Okay. I'll get to this, explaining that in just a second. But here on the left is a piece by an artist that I really, really loved, Steve Dillon. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He created, or co-created, maybe I should say, Preacher. And this basically is Jesse Custer Preacher, but it's just sort of a jokey cameo. This page is from a Gen 13 annual, and the Gen 13 cast comes across Jesse Custer, Preacher, just on the street. It's sort of played for a joke. It's not necessarily canon that they met him, because this is a superhero comic. Jesse Custer is just his own thing, if you've ever seen Preacher. But I loved his work in Preacher. Preacher pages are pretty expensive in general. I mean, there's not that many of them, all things considered. It was, you know, went for like 5 years or something. So I was able to get this one for a little bit better price than you might get a Preacher page. And to me, it still meant a lot because I just love this artist. And it's really interesting when you own artwork like this. Like, I can see the blue, non-repro blue pencil lines that he used to sort of figure out what he was going to draw. And then he inked his own work here. So I think that looks really amazing. That was probably from around, we'll say 1997, I'm pretty sure on that. This piece is probably the oldest one that I own. This is from 1988, Wonder Woman number 19, and it's by George Perez, who's definitely a master. I'm going to pull this aside, and this is the Bristol board that George Perez drew on. And then he wanted to make an effect for this just sort of like cloud that's talking about sort of a flashback type thing. And so he drew this on a separate piece of vellum, almost as a patch. And I'm not exactly sure how they photographed this for the final production piece. But yeah, it has all these like marks that match up, and then it's in the right position. So that's kind of cool. It's actually 2 pieces. And it's got a bunch of his notes on the side and just sort of telling them like what he intends to do, because he used a bunch of zip tone. Like if you look at this, it's a pattern. And this piece here is a pattern. That's called zipatone. You'd actually cut it out with like an X-Acto knife and paste it right onto the paper, right onto the panel to sort of get a type of shading. And people don't use it too much anymore because we can do these things digitally, but it just creates an amazing effect. I will say, over in Japan, they still use all this zipatone stuff a lot in manga because that's still printed generally in black and white. Anyway, Wonder Woman herself in the page, so that was pretty exciting. Oh, and Darkseid, I believe. Yeah. This is a piece by a friend of mine. I still bought it, but Tony Moore, co-creator of Walking Dead. This is a piece he did with Robert Kirkman, Masters of the Universe, Icons of Evil. This is basically the Skeletor origin story, but I basically just got it because I love Tony's art, and so I'm not a massive He-Man fan, but I do love this page. I thought the issue was definitely a lot of fun. You've got Skeletor before he became Skeletor. I think he was a wizard named Keldor, and Beastman is also in the page, so that's fun. That was a comic print. That was just a one-shot from like 2003 or so. And then over here, this is on a hard piece of chipboard. Tony sort of painted with ink washes a zombie. So that's really nice. And then that piece up there is Trapjaw from He-Man by a different artist, Matt Roberts. And I've got some other pieces by him, so I'll talk about him some more later. But I'll rotate this so that you can see it better. Yeah, I think that both of those pieces are gorgeous. A lot of detail. Gorgeous. Obviously, I'm biased. I like all of these pieces. This is my tastes, but I love it. Okay, both of these are by Cory Walker, another friend, an artist that I really, really admire. He just has such clean, detailed line work. He and Robert Kirkman did a limited series for Super Patriot. So, same as Dave Johnson, but now it's Cory Walker doing the artwork. And this was around 2002, I want to say. Probably 2002. It's just kind of nice to own this stuff. There's all sorts of little things that Cory will often put in his artwork. If you look closely, he's got a sketch of the Hulk. He's got Science Dog's emblem up here. And up in the top corner, he's got sort of an inked profile of Super Patriot. So there's all sorts of little extras. It's also, this is like all pencil artwork, which is a little different because mostly pages get inked and that's what you're left with. But Cory's work is so precise and technical already and clean that they were able to use Photoshop to just digitally darken his pencils and skip the inking stage. And that was one of the covers. That was the cover for issue 3 of their limited series. Pretty beautiful. On the right-hand side is a pinup that appeared in the limited series, and that's by Matt Roberts, the same guy that did the Trapjaw piece earlier. I think I bought just a bunch of pieces all at once from Matt Roberts somewhere around like 2003 or so. He cut me a good deal for buying a bunch all at once, but he's a really talented artist. And at this point in time, he wasn't doing a lot of regular comics work because he was serving in the Navy. He was putting in his 20 years. And a few years ago, he hit that benchmark, retired with benefits, and now he's a regular artist on the comic book Manifest Destiny. Just an amazing comic book about Lewis and Clark, but supposedly they were additionally tasked not with just mapping out America, but in listing all sorts of supernatural creatures that used to be in the wild back then. So it's a really cool premise. I could stare at like the detail in both of these pages for like hours and be entertained. Here's an earlier piece by Matt Roberts. This is from Battle Pope Mayhem, and that was an early Robert Kirkman comic that he self-published. He created that with Tony Moore. Corey Walker and Matt Roberts each did some work on that, as well as some other artists. And so that was, boy, that was a long time ago. Let me think for a second. That would have been 2001, Battle Pope Mayhem. This is Balamb, a demon that would often fight Battle Pope, but would also, every time he appeared in a comic, he'd lose a body part. He lost his horns, his jaw, his arms, his torso. Every issue he was losing something. And then, of course, a lot of you will recognize that this is an early Walking Dead page by Tony Moore. And yeah, it's got Rick and Lori and Carl, bunch of the early characters, because this is just issue 5. So that's going back to 2003, I believe, was when that came out. There's no talk of a TV show back then. So I got this at a very good price. I'm sure it costs quite a bit now to get a page like that. But I got it at a good price, and I think it's gorgeous. And I'll also just say now, looking at it, back then, it was sort of set during the winter, and Tony had all these beautiful, gorgeous sort of dead trees in the background that really helped create a mood, a tone for the book. But since the show was filmed in the blistering heat in Atlanta, it's never seemed to be the dead of winter, which I think would really fit the tone of the show, but they've never really been able to do that. It's fine, it's just a difference. Now we're moving less from full pages and more into just sort of pin-ups and sketches and stuff, but I'm a huge fan of Sergio Aragones. This is his creation, Gru, a really, really stupid barbarian. If you've never read Gru, it's a very funny comic book. This is his dog, Rafferdo, and Gru was published by all sorts of publishers over the years. Marvel, Dark Horse, I don't know, Image. It's been published by all sorts of different people. He just sort of does it when he feels like it. And if you've ever read classic old Mad magazines from the 70s and 80s and 90s, Sergio had a lot of work in that. But this is the character in the creation that I love. So I really love this piece. And then there's a quick sketch from the Liberty Meadows comic by Frank Cho. And that's from around 2012. Obviously, a lot of people will get Frank Cho's beautiful ladies, but I kind of liked his cartoon characters from Liberty Meadows a little bit more personally. But either way, great artist, great artist. Mike Allred. Mike Allred is a big favorite of mine. This is from Madman Adventures 3, which puts it back around 1992 now that I think of it. So that's going back quite a ways. But Madman himself is in the book, or on the page is what I should say. So that was exciting. And boy, he was talented and had his style down right from the beginning. So that's a gorgeous page. And then I got a piece of art by Jeff Smith, the creator of Bone. There's the main character, Phone Bone. Very, very animated. Not tons of detail, perhaps, but it's still the main character, and it's gorgeous, and I'm very proud to own that. Okay, even more sketchy. Hellboy by Mike Mignola. So that's pretty cool. He banged that out in a second or something, and obviously a little bit longer than that. He banged it out so fast, and it was impressive to me because I know that these artists spend years and years and so much hard work and effort to get to the point where they can bang something like that out fast. So that's really impressive. There's a funny piece by Corey Walker back in 2002. That's a character he created called Big Floppy Package Man. And Corey went to an animation school, and he has a story about how one time he was just drawing a superhero, and the instructor came over and was like, okay, this is good, but it could use a little bit of work. Here, you need to make his crotch a little bigger. And the teacher was being totally serious, but the students all found it hilarious because he'd drawn the package way too big, in their opinion. So Corey turned that into a character. Can probably barely make that out. That is Balamb, the demon I was just talking about earlier from Battle Pope, and that's by Kirkman himself. Yeah, you can't really see that too well. That was just made at a party, and I was just like, well, I'll keep that. I was like, don't throw that out. I like that. You might not necessarily recognize this artist at first, but that's Jason Latour. And that's from back around 2001. He used to do a web comic called Four Seats Left, and he really wanted to break into comics. I remember at this point in time, it was like 2001, and he needed money, so he put this up on eBay. And I don't think anybody else bid. I think I got this for a steal. Of course, his style has evolved, and he's really popular now as the artist on Southern Bastards and the writer and creator of Spider-Gwen. So that was pretty cool, though, to get this piece back before he'd made a big name for himself. Batman by Frank Miller and Savage Dragon by Erik Larsen. All of these are things that I got in person, so I have a memory of them too. You know, like it's really nice to be able to look at these and remember the convention or remember the conversation I had with the artist and watch their technique as they drew. Erik Larsen has a really interesting technique when he draws. He just holds his pen in a very particular way and uses his whole arm to draw. It's fascinating. And that's a pretty simple piece by Frank Miller on the left, but iconic, nevertheless. And another Dave Johnson piece, just some sort of fantasy creation. Very detailed, though. I was quite happy with it. Probably actually a little hard to see on camera. This is non-repro blue pencil, so that if you ink it, this isn't as easy to pick up by a scanner or photography. And consequently, all I can say is in person, it looks amazing. And on camera, it's probably hard to make out all the detail. But it's gorgeous. Just take my word on it, okay? Little sketch by Nate Belgard, who's done comics at Image, like, let's see, he did Brit. Brit was fantastic. He's done some other stuff, and I'm just not thinking of it right now. This is from back in 2007 at some convention. I've known Nate a long time. So that was just like we were just all hanging out and all drawing for each other. So another piece by Dave Johnson, a Wonder Woman sketch, study. Another piece by Matt Roberts. That's a creation of his called Kung Fu Sally that he had self-published or... No, he didn't self-publish it. I'm sorry. Robert Kirkman published it. He used to publish an anthology called Ink Punks. Back when he did Battle Pope, he also published an anthology that had different writers and artists. An early Battle Pope and Jesus sketch by Tony Moore, and a Super Patriot by Erik Larsen. Erik Larsen created Super Patriot in the pages of Savage Dragon, and then allowed other people to take the reins. And then we've got two pieces by Robert Kirkman, who obviously is a writer, not an artist, but he will draw a sketch if you're his friend. And he's got Battle Pope here saying, look, no hands. And then, let's see. This is Sleepwalker. For a long time, Robert wanted to write that comic, and he's saying, I'm looking for the one called Bischoff. Man, I don't remember. That's probably a joke about Eric Bischoff from wrestling. Kirkman used to be really into wrestling. That's another piece by Jason Latour. I think he sent me that at the same time that he sent me the new X-Men sketch. It just says thanks. That's his main character from Four Seats Left. It was a really funny webcomic, actually. He's a funny guy. He's been doing serious stuff for a long time now, and he does it well, but he's also a funny guy. That's just a print by Tony, but he did sign it to me. I think it's gorgeous. That's like one of my all-time favorite covers for Walking Dead. I just think it tells a story in a really interesting way. We're seeing the back of Rick reflected in a zombie's eye. Pretty cool. Okay, this piece is sliding out. This is by Doug Mahnke. That's an artist I really admire. For Justice League of America, number 85. When would that have been? That would have been 2004? 2004, maybe? And it's interesting. This also has sort of a vellum cover. He clearly just sort of drew this whole panel of the Justice League reacting to something, and then he blocked this in. I guess it was supposed to be like a shadow of the villain in the extreme foreground, which is interesting. And then like the actual title here, the lettering was cut out and pasted onto the board itself, which is something in the early days of digital lettering, they still would print out the lettering sometimes and affix it to the actual artboard. They didn't here. This stuff is all actually hand lettered, but the title of the issue was printed out and pasted. And then I've got a few more sketches, I guess. Don't remember all of these. Let's see. Okay, this was a short-lived fantasy comic by Robert Kirkman, and that's an original sketch by its artist, Matt Tyree. That was cool. There's another Sleepwalker by Kirkman. I basically ask him to draw Sleepwalker all the time. Oh, there's another one by him, and he says, "I never wanted to draw Sleepwalker." And this is, it's funny that this is in here. This is by my friend Maddie. It just says, you know what, you can read it if you want. So that was from just hanging out at a convention back in 2002. Les Mcclain is a great artist who was doing the Tick back around 2011 and was taking commissions. And I asked him to draw the Monarch from Venture Brothers, and I think he did a beautiful job. Really cool. And this one means a lot to me. This is Dean Winchester from the show Supernatural by Ben Edlund. Now, Ben Edlund got his start in comics by creating The Tick. And it was always exciting to me because Ben Edlund was from like 2 towns over from where I grew up, a few years older than me. And the fact that he was in comic books was an inspiration to me. I was like, oh, anybody can do it. That's awesome. And then he went into TV and started writing and producing various TV shows, including he worked for many, many years on the show Supernatural. And I got this sketch of that because I figured everybody asks him for The Tick. So I asked him for something a little different. I think he did a great job. And he doesn't draw as much anymore because he works mostly as a writer. So, but I got this around 2013, so not that long ago. And finally, I'll probably have to blur that. Actually, no, technically I shouldn't have to because this person is wearing pasties. This was from a Dr. Sketchies session, and if you haven't heard of those, that's where you pay like $5 or something to get in, and there's a live burlesque model doing poses, and it's usually held at a bar. You have some drinks with friends, and you sketch. You sketch short poses and then longer and longer. And this one is by my friend Scott Brooks, who makes his living as a painter. He's also done a lot of magazine covers over the years. Just an amazingly talented guy. And he pesters me because he says, you know, we should do a comic book together. And I'm just intimidated because I think he's so talented. But I would also love to collaborate with him. Wonderful, wonderful man, talented artist. And he gifted me that piece, which means the world to me. So that's the original art. And I love it all. It all means something to me. By a lot of artists that I love, or from conventions that I had a wonderful time at. or really both. But yeah, so just thought I'd share that with you all, because what's the point in owning this gorgeous artwork if you can't share it? So I always have this out to show friends if they're into comics and stuff. Let them take their time looking through it. All right, thanks for watching, folks. Bye.